Hello and welcome to our webinar highlighting the distinguished submissions from our recent Transcelerate Hackathon on digitizing clinical study design. My name is Stacy Teagan. I'm here representing Transcelerate along with my colleagues, Garrett and Shannon. Today you'll hear from three leaders of our digital data flow workstream. Bill Illis is our overall initiative lead, Stacy Murray is our DDF technology lead, and Todd Rajep, a DDF stakeholder engagement lead. But who you're most excited to hear from today are the teams who generated the distinguished submissions for our hackathon. Our teams are Microsoft and Telenotion Insight, Norcore, and Trials AI. Today, they will each walk us through the prototypes they generated to address the challenges around study design. After a brief intro to our DDF workstream and the hackathon itself, we'll then dive into these prototypes. We do want to leave some time at the end for your questions. Just quickly, some logistics for our call today. All participants are muted. However, we do encourage you to submit questions for our distinguished submission teams during their presentations, using the GoToWebinar control panel. The image here highlights the panel controls. We ask you to focus your questions on the prototypes themselves and the approach that our teams use. Note that this webinar may be recorded in whole or in part. If you do not consent to being recorded, please send a note using the questions panel. We will also be running a few voluntary and anonymous polls. I'd like to test that poll feature now. I'm going to go ahead and launch a test poll around our favorite color. So if you all can select which one of these colors you feel is your favorite. We have all of the highlights here: blue, red, orange, pink. Thank you all for participating. I think we can close the poll. We're about at 70% participation. Blue always in the lead. Thank you all. Okay, a few ground rules. We'll keep our session today very focused on the hackathon. This, like all Transcelerate webinars, we won't be able to discuss use of vendors, our member company development plans, any costing, and we can't discuss any specific adoption of Transcelerate tools or vendor solutions. Just to kick us off and orient those who may not be familiar with Transcelerate, I'll just give a high-level overview. We are a not-for-profit entity created to help the industry-wide with solutions and tools that we do post to our website free of charge. Today, and ever since 2012, we continually take on new challenges across clinical, preclinical, and pharmacovigilance. You see that we have now 20 member companies, all biopharmaceutical companies, and over 30 initiatives. We would love to hear from you to understand our baseline. What is your current knowledge level of the Transcelerate Digital Data Flow Initiative? So we'll take a quick poll here. Your options are novice. This may be about your first exposure to digital data flow. Perhaps you've attended a prior webinar or visited our website, or maybe you're a much more advanced user or maybe even participated in the hackathon. So give everyone just a few seconds to submit their answers. I see lots of answers still coming in. Okay, I think we can post the results. All right, it looks like we have a pretty broad mix, even 41% new to digital data flow. Really thank you for that. That helps us understand for our session today. We're going to dive right in then. We'll turn it over to Stacy Murray to give you a quick overview of our digital data flow workstream and especially our hackathon event. Stacy?
Thank you, Stacy. Next slide, please. Hi, I'm Stacy Murray from UCB. I'm one of the co-leads of the technology stream within the digital data flow program. I'd like to set the stage a bit for the hackathon, starting with what is digital data flow and why did we take the approach of a hackathon? Digital data flow is a collaborative program within Transcelerate with a focus on the journey towards a common language that will enable harnessing the full potential of data in research and development, and at its core, the concept of information sharing and process harmonization has been its beacon of light. It began with a few projects and is transitioning into a program of work. To maximize the impact of the program, there are a few key focus areas. These focus areas are guiding the program towards the vision of a true end-to-end digital data flow. In that vision, there are key pillars that we need: enabling digitized protocols that will lead to auto-configuration of key clinical systems, that will enable and support the use of advanced analytics, and through it all, connect data and processes to enable downstream automation, when envisioning this being enabled through an open-ended, flexible platform. Next slide. But what does digital data flow really mean? When considering the current state process of manually developing a protocol that leads to manually creating a schedule of assessments, that leads to manually creating and setting up your electronic data capture system, and further manual efforts for the same content within the statistical analysis plan, clinical study report, and more. Now ask yourself, how many times did I just say manually? And more importantly, what impact could you imagine if manually then transformed into the term parallel? When you ask yourself that question, you start to connect with the core vision of digital data flow. Taking that content from a manual linear process and transforming it into a parallel automated process with the ability to feed information to downstream and upstream apps, as well as learn from historical data and other disparate resources. Now push that vision even further into a platform that can assess the overall impact of changes, such as a protocol amendment, and automatically propagate those changes, and you have the vision of digital data flow. But it's a vision, and we ask ourselves, how can we verify the feasibility of this vision while jump-starting innovation? Through these discussions, the concept of a hackathon was considered. Through the hackathon, we could verify the design that the digital data flow team has developed and captured within its conceptual solution material. We can be engaged with technology vendors and get practical feedback. We believe the best way to assess the viability in the design is building code for some real-world scenarios. But it's about more than just feasibility. It's about jump-starting innovation and providing a forum for prospective technology providers to learn about this initiative. And if they choose to develop products, they will get a jump start on development using the materials provided by the DDF team. We also saw an opportunity to engage a large group of technology providers to help drive industry alignment on the core principles of interoperability and open solution framework, while encouraging startups and non-traditional providers to share their innovative ideas, bringing together ideas from all sources, large and small. So we embarked on a hackathon. Knowing the hackathon would have a limited time frame, we needed to focus our objectives and strategy and provide our participants with the best material possible to guide them on their quest. The team prioritized items from the DDF Vision, took an agile methodology approach, wrote user stories that contained supporting mock data, as well as a guiding workflow connecting those user stories along the process. In addition, the DDF solution framework and conceptual design and problem statement material were provided for a more in-depth understanding of the overall objective of digital data flow and to help provide context. Those user stories and the associated workflow provided a map for the participants with a focus on library functionality, general system functionality, and protocol data functionality. The hackathon was a 45-day event with a focus on study design aspects of digital data flow vision. With 176 registered participants and 28 teams participating. At the close of the hackathon, we received 15 submissions. A panel of judges with expertise spanning from standard setting bodies, process automation, systems architecture, protocol content, and data. These judges used a rigorous process when reviewing prototype submissions. They reviewed them for interface to support diverse roles, sophisticated approaches to library management that would enable a standards-driven data flow and automation, rich functionality that applies technology to go beyond basic functional requirements. In addition, these submissions were evaluated for a variety of areas: completeness of user story execution and their overall understanding of the challenge, how well technology has been utilized to support the business process, including UI and UX development. Did the submission demonstrate a compelling or impressive technology and/or architecture that was used to execute the user stories? And of course, were there any innovative design elements, approaches, or principles within the submission? You bring all of that together from all of our judges, and we have our distinguished submissions. I'd like to hand it back to Stacy to introduce those submissions.
Thank you, Stacy. And now I'm very excited to turn our attention to our distinguished submitters. We greatly appreciate the efforts of all the companies that participated. However, before we do that, just a quick highlight that Transcelerate doesn't endorse vendors or products. Our members don't coordinate with regard to which technologies or products they buy or which vendors they use. Rather, each member makes their own decisions regarding their products and services. But now the presentations we will go through each one of our distinguished submissions, and they will highlight how they approach the challenges of the hackathon, walk us through their prototype, and tell us how their technology meets our challenges. First up, in purely alphabetical order, we'll turn to Microsoft, IntelliNotion, and Insight.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Slater.
And I'm Ryan Tubbs.
And we are co-founders of the Clinical Research Innovation Hub at Microsoft. CRIH is focused on driving innovative solutions to the problem of patients being delayed access to the best available treatments. It now consists of more than 20 different organizations, including nonprofits, industry consortia, systems integrators, and software companies, alongside educational institutions, healthcare providers, life sciences companies, and CROs. CRIH has 3 core focus areas that we believe, when taken together, will accelerate delivery on our mission: creating an end-to-end digital representation of clinical research studies, maximizing the value of all data that is useful in a research context, and meeting patient needs as research modernizes. The Transcelerate Hackathon has given us a great opportunity to bring together some key CRIH members to build a prototype that we believe can form the basis of the future state of clinical research that is continuous and transparent, with patients at the center. It has also given us an opportunity to highlight how new technologies can be integrated most effectively into this future state vision.
So everything that we do in the spirit of open innovation. And that's why when we heard about the Transcelerate Hackathon, we didn't just put our own Microsoft resources to work. We put the entire hub to work. To truly innovate a solution to a problem of this magnitude, we need a real diverse set of resources with diverse perspectives and skill sets. And that's exactly what we assembled. Insight, for example, employs some of the best user experience resources in the world. They've really helped us over the years to shape some of the experiences of the offerings in our portfolio and really bring it into true life form. They have an uncanny ability to take a user's set of requirements and turn it into a user experience that a user actually wants to use. IntelliNotion has one of the most flexible and intelligent content information management systems on the market. Built on the Microsoft Cloud, IntelliNotion served as the technology platform for our prototype. Paul and I would really like to thank Transcelerate for the vision and for putting this hackathon on. And thank you to the judges for selecting us as distinguished submission. Now, on with the show.
We're going to start our tour with a walkthrough of our functioning prototype, a digital study building and library management tool. We designed it with a simple and intuitive user interface for the optimal human experience. Users can easily access external and internal terminology standards and data sources and manage libraries for efficient maintenance of structured text and templates. A couple of the noteworthy benefits are the ability to reuse content and templates from previous studies, and the ability to export trial metadata and structured text to internal and external databases. All of this is built on compliant cloud services using commercially available open source technologies. Now, let's head over to the prototype.
In this video, we'll demonstrate the capabilities to create and manage reusable libraries of study elements that are used during the study design processes and document generation, such as the generation of the protocol. To create new libraries from the libraries area of the platform, by adding new libraries, he's able to confirm how the managed library is to be used, whether it's to be managed, whether it should show up in searches, etc. And he's also able to set the reuse policy for the components to be managed within the library. There are several types of reuse policies he can set. He can set the reuse policy to repurpose or derived, which essentially means that content reused from this library into downstream processes or documents are repurposed and can be edited, or he sets the policy to use as is, which essentially means that the component cannot be edited where it's reused within downstream processes and documents. So he's now able to save and create this library. The test library has been successfully added. And as you'll see, this is the test library that he's created. The test library currently contains no components, but he can start creating components within this library, or he can actually also import content from external sources. So content can be imported, the components that he wants to import can be imported from files that actually contain the components from external sources or your master metadata repository or other systems. When the job is executed, the components in the library will be populated. So let's take a look at a couple of the libraries that have been previously created. So for the study design elements, there are a number of libraries that Frank has created, such as objectives and endpoints, exclusion-inclusion criteria, protocol title, study assessment templates, and these are all design element libraries that have been created. So let's take a look at one of them. This is the objectives and objectives library that have been created for an indication of Alzheimer's, and there are a number of library components that are in here. All of these have an approved state, but they could actually be driven through a lifecycle state. If you recall, he had created the components for the test library to be set as draft, and when components are imported or created, they will be set to draft state by default, and the stewards of the library can actually take that through a life cycle to publish them to an approved state and make the approved components only available for reuse for downstream purposes. So with this approach, Frank is able to create all of the libraries that he needs for the various design elements, make sure that they are reviewed and approved within the stewards and the review team for that particular content or element, and make them available for reuse downstream. The content elements from the libraries, as they are reused into the study design process, make this very flexible, ensuring that standards are complied with in downstream processes. It also improves the quality and consistency of the information through the study design and clinical development processes. As you'll see, this demo study 0418 that I created was created by me, and it's the first version of the study. So as the clinical director, I can go in and launch my study builder, And when I launch my study builder, you'll see that the basic study information is pre-populated from the study. So the basic information and some of the other study information elements are populated into the study design. I can now go in and start compiling my design elements. In the protocol level content, I can begin to populate the protocol title. In this case, the protocol title is populated from an existing library of protocol titles for the therapeutic area. For this particular therapeutic area, there's one component in the library that's been predefined. I can go and preview this to make sure this is the protocol title that I'm looking for. And the component from the library is opened for me, so I can review this and confirm this is indeed the title that I'm looking for. And I can then bring this in from the library into my title for the study design. I can start compiling my objectives and endpoints. In compiling my objectives and endpoints, I can do this in one of two ways. I can import it from a previous study that I might have, where I have objectives and endpoints that I want to use as a starting point, or I could actually individually import objectives and endpoints from libraries that have standardized components that I can bring in and use for my study. So in this case, I'm going to import from a previous study. I know I have a study that has the objectives and endpoints I'm looking for my study, and then I can augment or edit it. So I'm going to bring this in from the study that previously had been created. And when I bring it in, what that does is brings in the elements from the selected study into this study. So as you'll see, the objectives are populated, the related endpoints are populated. So this particular study had two objectives. The first objective had two endpoints, and the second objective had a single endpoint. So I can now view this, and I can determine that for the second objective, and I'll add one more objective from the library here just to demonstrate. So these are the objectives for this particular therapeutic area that are being compiled into the objectives library. So again, I can preview these if I need to, but I'm going to choose this objective. The objective is populated. I can select my objective level. I can associate appropriate endpoints to this objective. So again, I'll choose my endpoint, going to save my design. And what I want to show here is the versioning of the study. So if I look at the versions, as you would have noted, this was when the study was created earlier. And I've compiled some of my design, and this is now at version 0.2, and the study is now saved to the next version. When the study is actually promoted to an approved state, it'll be set to a major version of the object itself. So when I'm ready to go back in, I have my design elements that I've previously compiled. I'm now going to continue to compile the design. So based on the study that I imported previously, you'll see that my schedule of activities has also been populated from that study into this design. So in this case, I can actually use this to compile it and keep the imported values from the study that I had previously imported from. And if I go to my assessment details that have been assigned, you'll see that visits and visit schedule is populated here in the table. And when I expand on my procedure groupings, you'll see the related visits that have been configured. I can, if I choose, add anything else here, edit these, and you'll also see that the endpoints have been populated here. And as you'll see, my updated version of the study has been promoted to 0.3. and I've now completed my design.
We hope you enjoyed a walkthrough of our functioning prototype, which was based on core hackathon requirements. But we didn't stop there. In an effort to bring to life our vision for the future of standards-based end-to-end digital clinical trials workflow, we created an interactive UI to demonstrate the art of the possible based on modern, compelling technologies. One such technology is blockchain, which provides an immutable source of the truth that is safe and hack-proof. Imagine, for a moment, the possibility of blockchain-controlled clinical trial workflow that provides participants with immediate visibility into all study metadata, including protocol titles, objectives, amendments, import-export query logs, and more. Take it even further and consider blockchain-controlled IRB board consent process. Is this all possible? Yep. Let's have a look.
Assume in this example that we're walking through a study that has already been created and we're about to start the onboarding and enrollment process. You could clearly see two sections within this little tile over on the right, where there's recent studies and other studies. The point of this is to surface things that have been recently worked on, making ease of navigation and recognition simple for the user. We're also establishing visual hierarchy and leveraging industry best practices that align with the user's mental model on interactions that they've had in the past. You'll see text links that act as navigation are underlined. Statuses are clearly defined by various colors, green being good, red being something on the negative side. We could also see that the sections are in columns for titles, dates, version numbers, and status, allowing easy parsing of information. We also introduced chevrons for expansion of information, which will reveal the various teams that are interacting within this particular study. This is showing both internal teams, internal sponsor teams, as well as external regulatory teams. Also, we are leveraging industry best practices by having tooltip hover states, which prevents the user from having to dive into navigation and navigating away from their starting and entry point by revealing supplementary information at a surface level, allowing them to have a snippet of info at this surface allows them to quickly understand where they're going to be traveling next.
Looking under the hood, we envision a platform supporting the entire ecosystem of organizations involved in the end-to-end life cycle of a clinical research trial through a single source of data truth. Importantly, this data source is not a centralized repository that resides, say, within the pharma sponsor's infrastructure, but a shared trusted data source where each organization has an individual identical copy. To achieve this goal, we are leveraging technologies such as blockchain, a secure, shared, and immutable data ledger, combined with machine learning to bring efficiency through transparency and automation to the clinical research trial end-to-end life cycle.
To view additional details on a study, the user would click on the underlined text to navigate to what we're calling an approval summary page. Imagine this as a dashboard giving the user a high-level visual overview on the status of the entire protocol and study as a whole. We're using recognizable imagery to suggest an action or a status of various elements. A check mark means something has been completed. A ... resembles something that has not been completed yet. And an obvious orange with an exclamation mark indicates something that needs attention. These are also ADA compliance compatible. So if there are folks that are colorblind, we're not relying on strictly just using colors, but also iconography to suggest a status of something. You'll notice that there are these little blue indicators above areas at the top, which add additional information if there are various trial sites within a particular group. Below in the various cards, you can see each team has their own unique section where we clearly outline the team lead, the component and area of focus on which that team is supposed to be focusing on, who those areas are going to be reviewed by, the various statuses, and a visual indicator of the percentage of completion. We are also calling out the number of change requests that may have come through, and if there's any applicable notes from the team or to the team, we would highlight those there. Leveraging hover states would allow them to expose various options with each one of these text links. So if we hover over Marcus Jones, we could simply call, chat, email, or schedule a meeting. If we want to see a change request that has come through without going through the actual details of that change request, we could hover over that and get a snippet, a little summary of that request, and the ability to go straight to that in the navigation structure.
In this example, we see a deeper view of the value of visibility into a shared data layer across all the organizations contributing to the clinical research trial. This shared data layer extends beyond bringing efficiency and consistency to the work products of the internal teams, such as pharma and CROs. Importantly, participation in a shared data process extends to the regulatory agency organizations, such as the FDA or any health authority, auditors, ct.gov, and the study enrollment sites, enabling them to easily access and leverage a single source of data truth to improve efficiency in their internal workflows and making their work product documentation and certified approvals visible across all the organizations participating in the clinical trial.
If the user decides to have a preview of the study detail, navigating at the top, clicking on the study details provides a view-only snapshot of the output of the study detail. On the right-hand side, they have a thumbnail preview of each page, allowing for ease of navigation and quick scanning of documents. Navigating from here, if they want to continue a conversation thread or establish one with the various teams, both internal and external, they could do it through the chat and communication tab, archiving this entire conversation and making communication streamless across the entire lifespan of the project.
In these examples that were just shown, we see the importance of efficient communication and multiple sources supporting the workflows of all the organizations. This is accomplished through machine learning algorithms that are informed by activity on the shared data layer and supported by blockchain. The machine learning model can then act through an intelligent agent to bring attention to pending actions that need to occur for the workflow to proceed. Additionally, machine learning can support the workflow process through accessing internal upstream and downstream systems, as well as external data resources to surface data assets to support workflow efficiency.
Thank you for that excellent presentation and for your participation, and to the full team from Microsoft and Telenotion and Insight. I do just want to take a moment and just acknowledge the audio challenges that many of our participants have had. You do have an audio pane within your GoToWebinar panel. You may be able to switch your speaker. We found that for some folks, switching to computer versus the phone has helped, or some folks might have multiple speakers associated if they have multiple displays. Another tip is just to check any audio connections that may be active on other apps, such as messaging apps. For all, we will be posting a recording of the majority of today's session, including a demonstration from our distinguished submissions. So if there are audio challenges, we will make this accessible to those offline after. And one final reminder to go ahead and submit any questions in the questions pane, and we'll get those over to our panelists for the Q&A session later. With that, we'll turn to our second distinguished submission, and we'll hear from the team at Noracore.
My name is Frederick Malfe, and I will be presenting the Noracore submission to the Transcelerate DDF Hackathon. Before starting, I would like to give credit to the Transcelerate DDF team for organizing the hackathon and challenging the industry around the concept of digital data flow. At Noracore, we truly see this as a call to action. We will give a short introduction about Noracore as a company and give some details about our approach to the hackathon This will be followed by an overview of the platform architecture that was used to develop the submission. And finally, we give a hands-on demonstration. Some background about NeuroCore. We are focused on delivering solutions for digitized clinical development, where standards-driven automation and the use of a digital protocol go hand in hand. The goal of these solutions is largely to enable a lean protocol process, to increase automation, shorten cycle times, while at the same time guaranteeing regulatory compliance. I would like to give credit to the NeuroCore team for pulling together the submission for the DDF Hackathon. We had multiple teams organized around setting up the reference libraries, the study design service, UX UI development, and integrating the solution with the metadata registry and the EDC automation component. As to our approach, we first reviewed the user stories and identified extensions that would demonstrate both the feasibility and the scalability of a solution that could support the ambitious vision set forth in the DDF white paper. Our focus question all along was, what does it take to do this for real, rather than just building a short-lived prototype? Once the work was scoped, we embedded the execution within our existing product development process, going through the requirements review, discuss wireframes, UX designs and architecture, set up a Jira Kanban board, and in parallel we had a team setting up the DDF reference libraries in the MDR. In terms of deliverables, we were able to implement all of the user stories. We produced 4 hours of video demonstrations and deployed a live system on AWS that was available for the DDF Hackathon judges. The feedback of the judges is interesting because it highlights a few critical foundational components that I think are essential for any comprehensive solution in this area, which is a strong data repository component and a platform approach for hosting multiple integrated applications. Finally, the innovation around the SOA alludes to an approach of moving away from strict form-based thinking to a more logical approach driven by study activities with traceability to biomedical concept, linked to objectives and endpoints within a TA and indication context. Before getting into the demonstration, we would like to say a few words about platform and architecture. All of the applications run on a microservice architected platform, and each application runs as a dedicated microservice with its own technology stack within a Docker container. The same is true for all utility services like user management, audit, notification, workflow, and search. All of this runs on a highly scalable Kubernetes backplane that can be deployed on any cloud provider. All requests go through an API gateway, and user interface apps communicate through that gateway, accessing the backplane through a federated GraphQL interface. For the demonstration, we refer to the study design workflow diagram provided by the DDF team. A full demonstration would take around 2 hours, so we will limit ourselves to the most important points. For the user stories about the reference library, we made use of a metadata registry or MDR to develop and store all of the relevant metadata. In addition to existing data standards libraries, we extended the MDR to cover metadata for SOA activities, linked to objective and endpoint templates, and a metadata model covering the study design and protocol elements. This is an example of protocol elements. These elements are organized in pages and sections, and this metadata fully drives a protocol element editor in the study design service. To demonstrate the scalability of this approach, we included a full metadata model of all the data elements covered by the CIDIS trial summary domain, including mappings to the clinicaltrials.gov and UDRAC models. All of the metadata is linked. For each indication, we can trace the link to objectives, endpoints, biomedical concepts, and activities. This metadata drives the study design application to integrate the endpoints with the schedule of activities and allows the downstream automation of the EDC build. The main use case of the hackathon are the user stories covering study design, from creating a new study to defining the protocol content, objectives and endpoints, all the way down to creating the schedule of activities. For this, we will do a live demonstration. From the dashboard, we first create a study. We fill out the elements in the wizard. We select the program, study identifiers, and the key study elements. We create the study, and we can see that on the dashboard we now have a new study card. On the study card we have different actions available. Next we enter the study and protocol elements. We can see that these elements are organized in pages and sections, driven by the metadata model in the MDR. For the DDF submission, we have considerably extended the scope of the protocol elements to demonstrate the viability of a realistic and metadata-driven protocol element editor. These elements can also be shared by other applications, like, for example, a structured protocol authoring app. At this point, I'm going back to the dashboard. To save time, we have prepared another study with some of the protocol elements already filled out. If we move to study design, we can see that we have entered the key study model elements. We have also created 3 different arms, one for high dose, one for low dose, and a placebo arm. We have also created a set of objectives and endpoints. When we create or edit an objective or endpoint, we can see that it is decomposed, driven by a template defined in the MDR. Some of the endpoint parameters define activities and study events that are used in the SOA. We can see that we have a primary study event for baseline, multiple secondary study events at week 8, 16, and 24 to measure the change from baseline, and a study activity implied by the measure identified in this endpoint. Once we are happy with the study design, we can create a schedule of activities which will be done in 3 steps. In step 1, we select from the available defined activities in the MDR. The fact that these activities are defined in the MDR will guarantee that all of our selections are standards compliant and can be linked back to a full set of metadata information that enables downstream automation. Some defined activities are mandatory as defined in the MDR. We can also make our own selections or decide to accept suggestions based on the previously created endpoints. When we hover over an endpoint on the left-hand side, we can see the activities suggested by these endpoints. Accepting a suggestion will automatically include the related activity. Once we are happy with our selections, we can apply our selection. And in step 2, we can see all the detailed information of the selected study activities. In step 2, we can see all the detailed information of the selected study activities all the way down to the data element and code list level. Again, all based on the metadata in the MDR. As an example, we can drill down in vital signs. We could do the same for all of the other activities. To demonstrate the scalability of the DDF submission, we have created in the MDR a complete library of all of the safety activities to the level of detail shown for vital signs, together with all of the metadata needed to generate the full fidelity EDC build. We further see selections for the study default of an activity element when its parent is selected in the schedule. Activity elements can be mandatory, recommended, or optional. To conclude step 2, we accept the study activity defaults as defined in the MDR. Finally, in step 3, we can create a schedule and set up the planned activities. We can manage a schedule for each arm or share a schedule across arms. We see that on the left-hand side, we already have our study activities as defined in the study defaults. The next step is to define the study events. We can add our own study events and also select study events suggested by the endpoint definitions. We will select the suggested study events. And notice that we also have information which planned activities are suggested for these study events. We will now add all of these events. Closing the dialog takes us back into the schedule, and we can see that the study events have been added to the table and planned activities have been selected based on the study defaults. Within the schedule, we can further drill down to the data element and code list level, and if needed, change the selections for a planned activity element across individual study events. Note that mandatory items cannot be changed and thus guarantee data standards compliance. Once we are happy with the SOA, we can initiate exports back to the MDR, create the EDC study build, and retrieve export documents in different formats. This concludes the live demonstration. The SOA app has many more features we don't fully have the time to demonstrate. We can create time point schedules per study event, for example, to define multiple vital signs measures after drug exposure. We can mark activities like adverse events as continuous activities, and we can add footnotes to study activities, study events, and individual planned activities. For the final part of the demonstration, we will go back to the slides. We are left with exports, reports, and versioning. The SOA can be exported from the study design application to the MDR. We can see here that the study arm matrices have been instantiated within the MDR. This provides the link from the activities to the EDC, SDTM, and ADAM metadata. As part of this process, we created several export formats such as a Medidata Wave ALS export, ODM, Define, and RDF exports. All of these exports can also be downloaded from the SOA app. Depending on the EDC system, it is also possible to do an API-based integration. Back to the dashboard, we can also export the city's trial design domains for a study. This export has a sheet for each of the trial design domains. We also created reports to view the content of the reference libraries. This demonstrates the capability for applications to access the common data model through a federated GraphQL API. In particular, we see here an export of a relationship tree of objective and endpoint templates by indication. Finally, the DDF stretch goal was to demonstrate versioning and show how approved versions are left as read-only, while new versions that are in progress can be edited and pick up newer versions of the reference libraries. With this, we have concluded our demonstration and would like to thank again Transcelerate for the opportunity to present, and also thank the NeuroCore team for all the hard work of putting this submission together. For further information, please visit the NeuroCore website or drop me an email if you have specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick and the NeuroCore team. And now our last but not least, we will turn to our final distinguished submission, which is from Trials AI. Thank you, Frederick and
Hi,
NeuroCore.
everyone. I'm Kim, and my company, Trials AI, is on a mission to get treatments to patients faster. So we've been developing web-based technology to help research teams design more efficient clinical trials. We are thrilled to be selected as a distinguished submission for the Transcelerate Study Design Challenge, primarily because of the alignment we saw with our trajectory and the vision for the common data model. The judges were particularly impressed by several attributes of our submission. The first is the fact that it extends beyond the hackathon user stories with development of a natural language processing model that provides insights as well as recommendations from published protocols and scientific papers, as well as what key opinion leaders are publishing around alternative trial designs and use of new technology. The second area that the judges highlighted was our impressive integration with the common protocol template, as well as any other protocol templates. The third area that the judges highlighted was our easy-to-navigate user interface from the writing and clinical input perspective, as well as from the clinical operations data perspective. A focus of the hackathon was to build out digital data flow applications around a common clinical trial data model, or CDM. After reading through the thesis document provided by Transcelerate outlining the hackathon, we were excited to see how in sync we are in terms of some of the study design tools we were already building and how we both envision the future, where information is shared freely up and down the clinical trial ecosystem. Our submission for this hackathon was our thoughts on the best way to stay true to the submission guidelines by solving the specific user stories laid out, while also incorporating machine learning technology that we've already built to take the digital data flow another step forward.
When we read the hackathon user stories that called for the development of a common data model and library management system, we saw an opportunity to leverage some of the machine learning algorithms we've been working on. As part of the hackathon, we extended our natural language processing pipeline to extract terms from trial-related documents that can then be aligned with the vision of a common data model. Trials AI's ability to use tech in that way is what helped the prototype get selected as a distinguished submission. Now, since our NLP pipeline is generally a back-end process, we put together a quick demonstration of how some of this works using our command line interface. First, I'd like to give a little bit of a background about how our data are stored. Transcelerate proposes the idea of a standard data model for protocol data so that data can flow between applications in the clinical trials ecosystem. At Trials AI, we represent that data model as an ontology. Clinical trial concepts like therapeutic area, conditions, interventions and their indications, endpoints, eligibility criteria, all of the components that you expect to find in a trial protocol are all represented and defined in this ontology. The ontology becomes the blueprint for our natural language processing pipeline we call the Bonsai pipeline. The Bonsai pipeline is a system that leverages NLP-based machine learning algorithms to identify and extract features from trial-related documents and store them as normalized terms in a graph database. For the hackathon, we focused on applying this technology to some of the study-level data elements described in the user stories. Here we are using the command line interface, or CLI, to log into the system. We won't go into detail here, but as described in some of the hackathon user stories, our API is equipped to handle secure sign-on as well as a high degree of data segmentation to address organization privacy and data sharing concerns. Let's begin by invoking a machine learning-based text summarization algorithm to figure out what indication is referenced in the following title: Evaluation of exenatide in patients with diabetic neuropathy. You can see that our algorithm inferred the indication diabetic neuropathies. However, we illustrated a very common issue with the use of NLP in this way. That is, the title says neuropathy, and the algorithm identified neuropathies. Conceptually, we know those are the same thing, but in our strict world of software, these are not the same. We use our ontology to reconcile this to a standard term. Here, we're using the API to have the system tell us what the standard term is for this concept. You can see the response shows the standard term identified as diabetic neuropathy. Technology like this can be used to generate an entire database of terms. These terms become the foundation for a set of libraries that can drive machine learning recommendations in the study builder. The hackathon user stories also called for an interface to allow users to incorporate their own company-specific terminology into these libraries. We also recognize the need for a web interface for managing those terms and put together a prototype of a web-based interface for managing the libraries of terms that are produced from our NLP pipeline, while still being able to incorporate your own existing term libraries manually.
We've built infrastructure that allows us to manage and curate this ontology in both an automated way using machine learning and a manual way through our library manager. These systems allow for the creation of a bed of data that can act as a foundation for recommendations to a team of users designing a trial, all based on their role. Customers have their own view into this world. Our web interface for our library manager gives customers the ability to augment the data model according to their view. The hackathon user stories reference the need to allow users to manually control elements in the data model. This is typically done by a data manager or a librarian. We're building library management functionality into Trials AI for this purpose. Here's how a library manager would use our system to manually update and add to their libraries. I'm going to quickly walk through how we can add an individual term, bulk upload terms, and search for a term. By clicking Add Term, we can add term names, abbreviations, definitions, and synonyms. This is what a finished term would look like. Relationships can be added down here for things like indications, the type of endpoint, for instance, and the therapeutic area. Now we're going to bulk upload terms. By clicking Upload Terms, we can select a file on our computer and automatically update it to our library. Lastly, we can search for a term. So let's click the search box. As you can see here, we search for airway wall thickness, and we can now view that term in our library. We wanted to use this NLP technology while staying true to the submission guidelines and user stories laid out to take digital data flow to its next iteration. We'll show you how we do this in both the trial design and protocol authoring tools. Logging into the trial designer brings you to your list of development plans. Here's where you create new protocols for a development plan, see amendments you've made to protocols, and navigate to existing protocols to continue working on them. We'll create a new protocol in one of our development plans to show you how designing a particular trial works. Before we can begin selecting endpoints, choosing our eligibility criteria, and creating our schedule of events, Trials AI needs some basic info around your trial. This helps the accuracy of our recommendation system and scoring metrics. So we're going to select a treatment trial. Now we're going to create a Phase 3 COPD trial that's looking for approval by the US FDA. So let's add the information we'll need to set up this protocol. Let's click Continue. And now on this left-hand side of the screen, you're able to see that you can navigate to different sections of the protocol. Let's navigate to our Objectives and Endpoints section and begin working on that. We're going to select Efficacy as the primary objective. Over here on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see what we call the Discover panel. This is where you'll find suggestions from Trials AI's recommendation engine, scoring metrics using machine learning that help you design less complex, more patient-centric protocols, and relevant information to look into as you're designing your trial down here. So for instance, related trials, related journal articles, and related regulatory guidances. Over here in the middle of our screen is where we actually start adding data to our trial design. So let's click this select box right here. And as you can see in the Discover panel, it's now changed to add recommendations for particular endpoints. So by clicking any one of these plus signs, the endpoint will be added to this endpoint card. But instead of doing that, we're going to click on this info icon next to FEV1. Here you can see any information associated with FEV1, like a definition, any amendments that are related to FEV1 that we have in our database, related trials that you might want to model your particular trial after, that all use FEV1 as a primary endpoint, related journal articles, and by clicking on one, it will actually take you to that journal article. So let's do that really quick. We'll navigate back, and you can also look at related regulatory guidances as well. So now let's add FEV1 as our primary endpoint. We'll click this button right here. Now over here you see it's been added. Under this FEV1 endpoint, you'll see what we call at Trials AI qualifiers, which are other related pieces of information that are associated with this data point right here. You can add these qualifiers that are necessary for further defining it. So we'll add a method of analysis, and we'll select a mean change in FEV1. We'll select an assessment, and we'll add a time frame. Having each of these sections over here on the left broken down into data following something like the common data model rather than in documents makes it easier for digital data flow between systems. This data can be sent downstream to other documents like your protocols or your form consent forms, or it can be used in other systems like CTMS, EDC, or eSource systems. Now let's navigate over to our schedule of events, and we're just going to fill out this section to see what it feels like in our trial design tool as well. So we're going to add some study periods here. Now in this left-hand column, you can see the data that's been imported from the other sections of your protocol. making setup really easy. If there's another procedure or assessment you want to add, you'll just scroll to the bottom down here, and you'll click Add Procedure, and you can select it from there. I'm going to zip through the process of actually creating a schedule of events really quickly, just so you can see what the final product looks like. Now, if you navigate down to the bottom, you can also add footnotes to your cells. So we'll add a footnote. And as you can see, each one of these cells now has a footnote in it, and you can navigate down to the bottom and see all of the footnotes that you've added. Up at the top of the table, you can click this menu button to send this data from the schedule of events to your other systems, say for instance, setting up your EDC system or to a CTMS system, or you can export it for use in a different format. Now we'll move over to the protocol authoring tool, where you'll see two things. One, how the data you've selected in your trial design tool can be sent to other downstream documents for automation. And two, how to manage a library of snippets and documents for reuse during protocol authoring. So let's navigate over there. Landing in the Smart Authoring tool brings you to the list of protocols you and your team are currently working on. You can also navigate to document templates and section templates. At the top of this list, you can see the protocol we were working on in the trial design tool. Having a separate trial design and trial authoring tool allows teams to work in parallel like this. Let's move over to our section templates, where we can see how we can create snippets that we can reuse in different documents and different protocols. Here, you can create generic snippets that can be reused to create multiple protocols where they'll be filled in with the data you've selected in your trial designer. So let's look at what a snippet looks like. We'll click Objective Template 1, and here you can see text as well as linked variables that are filled in with the data from your trial designer. This is what it would look like if it was connected with the trial design. Let's save and exit this, and we'll navigate back to our list of protocols and see what it looks like to go from a blank template to a filled out protocol. So as you can see here, you have a template created. You can navigate to each one of the sections. Let's navigate down to objectives and endpoints. As you can see here, there's text with variable links. Now let's see what it would look like if this was connected to the trial we were working on earlier. As you can see, the variable links are gone, with actual trial data from the trial we had worked on in here replacing it now. You can see how digital data flow and common data standards make it easy to work between systems and create structured processes.
We see an opportunity to contribute and support Transcelerate in fully developing a common data model. Right now, the CDM is a concept based on a high-level idea. There's plenty of work to be done, and our hope is to continue to be part of this groundbreaking initiative beyond the hackathon. The exciting work we accomplished in this hackathon, combined with our AI tools, can result in powerful technology for research teams. Our vision for the future includes a library management system that conforms to a common data model powered by natural language processing, trial designs improved by using machine learning-based recommendations, protocols stored as data so that downstream systems can be automatically configured, and a protocol authoring tool that incorporates templates like the Common Protocol template, as well as other template snippets to maximize content reuse. This new paradigm takes us from a world where we're simply managing documents in disparate systems into a world where data is quickly accessed, standardized, stored, and used by systems up and downstream to automate today's manual processes. Our team is made up of experts in business and technology, with experience in process improvement, medical writing, AI, and enterprise application development. We are hard at work to bring the latest technology to the forefront of trial design. I hope this presentation gives you an idea of how our technology, combined with the thinking and the direction inspired by the Hackathon Challenge, came together to yield a winning submission.
Thank you, Trials AI, and thank you to all three of our distinguished submissions. These are extremely impressive pieces of work. We want to thank you and your teams for the hard work that you put into them. Now we'll turn over to Bill Ellis to give us some closing remarks. Bill?
Thanks, Stacy. Great to hear the stories of the hackathon experiences from the three distinguished submission teams today. My name is Bill Illis. I'm employed at Novartis, and I'm also the workstream lead for the Digital Data Flow initiative at Transcelerate. I want to wrap up the webinar today talking about our learnings from the hackathon and also the DDF and larger Transcelerate vision and some next steps. We are delivering many insights. We are deriving many insights from the hackathon submissions, and that work is still ongoing. 4 of the key learnings are illustrated on this slide. Firstly, both in the work to plan and prepare for the hackathon and from the conduct and submissions, we did make some refinements in our conceptual design, while all in all, we confirmed key principles and design components. We clearly saw that there's an appetite and even enthusiasm for cross-vendor, cross-pharma company collaboration in this space. We observed that industry alignment is growing and increasing buy-in to the idea of a vendor-agnostic interoperability supported by open standards and a common technical architecture. Finally, it was very apparent from the hackathon submissions that digital protocol study builder technology is advancing, and there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. Many of the products in this space had roots in component authoring, collaborative authoring type solutions. But we now see real progress towards breaking out of the document-centric paradigm and moving towards true digitization, as you could see in the demos we just went through. Shifting gears and moving on to the next slide, I want to bring it back to our DDF vision. The center of the DDF universe is our proposed study design repository built on an industry standard common data model. Can I have the next slide, please, Stacy? Out-of-the-box connections are enabled by standard APIs to multiple study builder products, which are the source of digitized protocol information. And on the left side, multiple upstream systems or data sources, which provide the basis for functionality, providing insights and assisting study designers. And shown on the right, connections to many all downstream study execution systems, which eliminate manual handoffs, re-entry of study design data, and enable process automation from study design to study execution. This is the essence of our vision for digital data flow in this space. I want to pause here for a last poll before we wrap up the webinar today.
Thanks, Bill. The opportunities and challenges around study design, we all know are very significant. We'd love to hear your thoughts from our audience today. And what do you think the largest challenge is? Clearly, these are all the challenges, but what do you think is going to be at the pinnacle of that? We have a few here: protocol content standards, reference API enabled design repository, user interface implementation toolkit, and collaboration. Some themes here for you to pick from. I see folks voting now. I appreciate this one is maybe a little bit more consideration than maybe your favorite color. So we'll give you another moment to finish out the poll. Okay, just 10 more seconds. And if you missed the poll, you can always submit a question regarding this poll, or maybe just a quick reminder to submit any questions for our Q&A session. Okay, I think we can close the poll. Thank you all. Okay, we see we've hit across, but I would say we have a significant here around the protocol content and data standards, certainly being in the lead, and a second around collaboration across system vendors. Thank you all for that input. Bill, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Stacy. Coming back to Transcelerate's overall vision for digital data in clinical trials, on this slide, you see a reference to two other Transcelerate initiatives in addition to digital data flow, which together form a program of work. This journey was initiated at Transcelerate by the Clinical Content and Reuse Initiative, which through its common protocol template started to transform document content into data and enable reuse in other documents. Digital data flow aims to extend the digitization to the point of breaking the document paradigm and enabling the flow of study design information and automated configuration of study execution systems. eSource further extends this from clinical research into healthcare systems, from setup of the study workflow in electronic health record systems to the acquisition of source data from these systems required for individual clinical studies. Specifically for DDF, what are we doing next? We're incorporating the learnings from the hackathon into our overall program of work. We're investigating ways that Transcelerate can catalyze the development and implementation of a common data model with the required standards. And we're working on defining a collaborative, multi-stakeholder approach to work with technology vendors, standards developing organizations, and the pharma industry through Transcelerate on a DDF reference implementation and further solutions. Finally, if we can move to the next slide, we want to say a big thank you to all of the vendors who participated in the hackathon and the 18 who made final submissions. The DDF team enjoyed the experience and learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. Also want to call out a thank you to the DDF team members who planned and executed the hackathon, our partner Be My App, who supported us in the conduct of the hackathon, and our panel of judges who at the end made the selection of the 3 distinguished submissions. Based on responses to the hackathon survey that we executed, we estimate a total of just over 10,000 person-hours of effort were expended in creating the final submissions. And this does not include the considerable time spent by the DDF team, Transcelerate staff, and pharma member company resources in planning and executing the hackathon. We believe this result shows the tremendous interest and commitment to working in this space towards modernizing and planning the planning and conduct of clinical studies based on protocol digitization and interoperability. We hope to continue this journey by building a collaborative, multi-stakeholder project, and we look forward to taking the next steps with you and others. Thank you to all the participants, and I'll turn it back to Stacy now, who will moderate the Q&A session for us.